Hello and welcome to the Coach Your Kids Right podcast. I am Skip LaCour, and I'm so glad you are joining me here today. Hey, in this podcast, I want to talk about balancing support and pressure. Signs your child's sports journey needs adjustment. How do you know if you're pushing your kid too hard? Right? If you are listening to this podcast, I know you're very, very interested in getting the most out of your child, their abilities, their talent, their resourcefulness, their resilience, their mental toughness. Right? And we want to do it through sports. Right? People may question your motives about, well, why are sports so important? Now, if you're like me, one thing about me is I've been on the internet since it started, back in 1995 with a website, with my bodybuilding and my fitness. So, I have years and years and years of the judgment, the comments, the negative comments, along with all the positive comments coming at me. All right. And so, I've just been battle tested for so long, just bombarded with that to realize, you know what? You can't make everybody happy. If I'm certain what I'm doing, then it doesn't matter what other people say. I got to choose my life. And whatever it looks like now, like in the process, doesn't mean it's going to look that way 6 months later, 6 years later, right? I know my mission. They don't. So you get that negative feedback. It's only when I'm uncertain will those negative comments affect me, because you know what? I don't like hearing that comment. I'm putting so much effort into this. I have the best intentions, but they're right. They're at least a little right. I need to make adjustments, right? So if you're certain of what you're doing and why this is so important to you, and who knows, maybe you are pushing your son or daughter too hard with this sports thing, but you have the best intentions. You got a big vision, and maybe you won't do it perfectly. Maybe you are pushing them a little bit too hard. You can make adjustments along the way. Go through that squiggly line, as I talk to my kids about. Nothing in life. They set a goal. It's not going to just, I set a goal, boom. I go right towards it. It's going to be a squiggly line of ups and downs and uncertainty and questioning yourself and then coming back and falling again before you actually achieve that goal. Well, that's this goal that we have for your family, for your child's sports, but really for, their personality. Why are you doing all this? To keep you certain when sometimes you aren't certain. When you're thinking that you're pushing your kid too hard. I can tell you this, my brother, he has two kids who did well in sports. So he's only 11 months older than I am, but he went through this whole process with his kids, and so he sees me go through. I get a lot of advice. He's been through this along with a lot of other of the dads around here. I'm just hungry for information. I'm looking for distinction strategies. I want to learn from anybody and everybody, and that's what I'm sharing. With you, it's a combination. It's just my own personal experience. All right, so and he said, I really like your message about the personal development. Now he knows me. I don't really think too much about it. Like I said, from my experience, I'm a little numb to what people's opinions are, where I can easily block them out. I don't even know they exist. All right, unless I know I need to hear it, right? That they're just saying something I know that I need to improve upon. Now I'm going to do a little sooner because of that negative feedback, But a lot of people might question that, and maybe you've judged other fathers, or could be mothers too, that they're just doing this child, they're living their dreams through their kid, all right, their unfulfilled dreams, and that's why they're pushing their kid so much, right? Or I don't know, they think the kid's gonna go pro to take care of them later on. I mean, I guess people can think whatever, right? Are you pure? Are you certain of what you're doing? All right. This question, if you're pushing your kids too hard, you don't need other people to question. You're going to question yourself, and I'm sure you do. I know I do all the time. We've talked about in this podcast reps, and I see it all the time. You can just tell, at the young age, it's not the kid just loves, the sport so much, and he got some influence, some guidance. Someone set the table. Someone connected to the level with him. They hypnotized him into thinking, "Oh, this is a good thing for you." They painted a story. They complimented their hard work. We talked about in the other podcast, about the right way to compliment the effort and not, the actual outcome or that they're a great athlete. We've talked about, somebody did a great job of programming their kid in the direction of enjoying sports and all those reps, right? It didn't just happen by accident, right? And so, when you're mashing up, it's kind of like a report card on how well you did. And it's not just the reps, it's not just the sports. All right, there's a psychology, there's a combination, and by listening to this podcast, we'll figure out together how to take it to the next level by this talk. So, I'll tell you, and it's important me as I go through this journey. All right, what my crazy storm. Look, I'll say this again. Studying personal development, peak performance from the masters for 35 years. I really believe that our interpretation of the world, at some point, we felt pain. We just must, and we just wired ourselves to put extreme effort, focus, attention. We put extreme effort, focus, and attention in an area for whatever reasons, whether it's through trauma, good, bad. Who cares why? You'll become outstanding at what you do. You give yourself the best chance to succeed. I can tell you, whatever it is, whether it's a guy who does a podcast every single day, all right, or it's an extremely dedicated father to his kids with athletics, or even if your child were to grow up and be an adult where, sports was his thing, or school was his thing, or making money was his thing, and being an entrepreneur was his thing, whatever, right? It's usually this combination of some pain or some story they created in their head that made it more important, maybe more important than anybody else. So, why push them too hard? Whatever's going to happen. I mean, we're all going to come to our interpretation, or so are our kids. So are you pushing them too hard? Are you willing to go to be wrong and then come back those adjustments? What are your intentions, right? And so it's important to like how at least my belief of why I'm here with you today. And, for me, I just remember like at 10 years old. So, my mother wasn't into sports at all, right? Not even sort of, right? Actually, it was my brothers and I's participation in sport that even opened that world up to her, right? And then my stepfather, kind of the same thing. He wasn't really into sports either. I remember it started for me, the organized sports. Somebody from school, we weren't into sports, didn't talk about sports up until, I don't know, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9. There were no sports. We weren't into sports, watching them on TV or anything like that because our parents didn't, do that. But for me, a classmate, they were short on their, baseball team, t-ball team. I don't know if we even had t-ball back then, but the little 6, 7-year-old division, I think it was 9 years old. I think it was 9 years old where I got into organized sports. And so somebody broke their arm. And so a classmate, and I went to a Catholic school, St. Philomene's school, and said, "Hey, can you be in our Little League team? Do you want to be in our Little League team?" Because someone broke their arm. Now, that's a involved story because we went to this Catholic school and we weren't really in the Little League district. We just went to school that was in this district and we did it, and everything. And so that turned on the whole organized sports thing. And then the next year, my brother joined in. My parents, they drove us around and probably a lot more supportive than I remember. But they weren't the parents like my brother. He coached like CYO basketball for both his son and his daughter. He did all 8 years, was the coach for both of them. All right. In addition, he did Little League and did all the swimming and all the sports, right? His kids are older, 30, approaching 30 or a little over. And so, he went to that extreme. We didn't have parents like that. As I remember it, they would use it if we didn't do our chores or act right or whatever. They wouldn't even take us as practice or the game. And I can remember so many times looking at the clock, and we didn't really live close to wherever we had to go to the games. And are we going to be able to go to our game? Do you know that we've got 5 minutes left? It was like torture getting there, any practice or any game. It was just uncertain, or that's how it felt when I was young. But that's showed my my parents' involvement. But I think whatever it did, and they had other things going on, but they came in and through my brother's energy, my energy, and then they came along, not fully committed, like to the level I am, of course, or even like my brother, but they bounced in and out, right? And I just really wanted to be good. It was just something I clung on to as my thing. It wasn't something like my kids have with me, this little journey, and all the reasons why personal development, all that. It was my own thing that I would push myself hard. And I just always remember, there would be this one kid, and it would not be like on every team in every game. There was this special kid. It would be like, I don't know, once every 10 games, somebody on the other team that was just some freak, not some genetically gifted freak, but he just stuck out to me because he had this extraordinary mindset. His body didn't even match up. He probably wasn't even that physically talented, but he just could do things. He had the confidence to do things that just amazed me, and I pushed myself really hard. And I remember at a very young age, because I had a stepfather, but I didn't feel that connection with a father. I remember coming to the conclusion, and I don't really remember what I absorbed. Now, with my son and my daughter, they say, hey, look at that muscle guy over there with the video, right? He comes to every single game. He's obviously very involved in this and that. I mean, I don't remember seeing dads like that. I'm sure they were there, but I just remember at a very young age, like 10, thinking, you know why that guy is so special? Not because of his talent, this and that, because he has a dad. He has a dad that tells him these secrets and tells him this. I don't know if that's true. I guess it's true, but it was just a belief that I came up with that was inside of me. And I always wanted to be this dad that I'm going to give all the secrets. I'm going to work. I want my kid to be armed with any precious mental, physical, sports-specific skill, strategy. I wanted to give them, my son, my daughter, that when they played sports, what I didn't have. So, you call that pain, you call that trauma. That's what drives me, whatever. I was talking to, we have this Skyhawks where, my kids were in organized multi-sports. Great little program. I think we started like 3 years old, multi-sports, and, the coaches are great. They've got funny, cute names. It's colorful. It's just a great program. And I was talking to the owner who does that as one of the biggest one. He's kind of moved on to something. He still runs that company, and he was talking. We had a great talk, and I'm going to have him on a podcast real soon. Yeah, because he's seen all this. He's seen all the parents, and he can give us great insight as what we're doing here in this podcast, and all the different the motivation. And he is just like, hopefully, like you, that it's the personal development bit. One thing about this, what's personal development? I use that because I've been in it, right? But what does that mean to you? To me, personal development, and thanks, my brother who listens to this podcast gave me some feedback. Personal development is really confidence. It's self-esteem, what your child thinks of themselves, right? Confidence is when, in self-esteem, is you do something that's so good. You don't need someone to tell you. I mean, you set out the goal, you set out the standards, you went through the squiggly line or whatever. You've impressed yourself. You don't need any feedback, right? My son does that a lot of times. He has a lot of confidence. He's a hard worker. He knows. And sometimes, he'll come and, hey, Daddy, did I do a good job? But I can tell by the way he asked me. He knows that he did. He just needs my validation. I go, you did a good job. I want him to get that full confidence, not have it come from me, because he feels it anyway. He just needs the validation, and I understand that. But, it's interesting. I talked about in the last podcast about fundamentals right from the start. And I did use an example, right, of my daughter who, and both my son, they, from a very young age, they shot the ball with their shooting hand with the backspin, line up the ball in basketball, pretty shot, nice arc, right? Instead of just, there's older kids who throw it over their shoulder, and that's probably how they started at 4 because the ball was too heavy, right? And it wasn't the fundamentals that they're going to have to do eventually were never implanted very young, and so they're carrying that over, right? And so I talked about, my daughter's her shot, her free throw shot. It's a beautiful shot, right? I just talked about that on yesterday's podcast, and she had a great game, basketball game. And I won't go on, because it's not about points and this and that, even though she scored a lot of points. But, what coach I was doing, I did the scoreboard, right? You volunteer parents, right? And the coach said to me, he said, Skip, I don't know what you're doing, but she's got the most beautiful free throws than anyone that I saw. I really respect her coach, really passionate. He's got older kids. I talked to him about all this stuff and insight that I'm sharing with you, too. He's been through it with his kids, and his daughter is on my daughter's basketball team. And that was quite a compliment coming from him, how passionate he is, how driven he is, how much he loves his kids. All right. But it's just interesting. That's something I talked about on the last podcast. And it is a beautiful shot, for a fourth grade girl, right? But it goes back to the fundamentals that I said. But here's my point. It's not about that she scored 16 points out of the team's 26 points. It wasn't that, those free throws look beautiful. And she's been working on it too. She's going through the journey. It's not about, and again, we're talking about sports. Are you pushing too hard? And you know what? For me, this is all about. It's about her confidence as a young woman growing up. See, with my son, I was a boy. I can turn him into man. I know how a boy thinks. I can go by theory about a woman's experience. I have my wife who went through that experience to help. But what is my part? It's sports. It's working hard. It's going through the squiggly line. It's having the great games and coming back from the games that you're bad to have another great game, right? And with my daughter, she isn't like my son. She is an extrovert. She doesn't have this exuding confidence and this swagger and body language. If anything, she's like 10 times the athlete that she allows with her body language. And they get into how kids are different. They how they want to play it, how they want to stick out or not stick out. And there's all pros and cons about sticking out or not sticking out. But I want her to try new things. I want her to know her power. All right, if she wants to be quiet or shy or not speak up, I want it to come out of strength, not because of out of uncertainty. And she had a great game. And you know what? For me, the victory was, a parent got together. We went to the pizza parlor afterwards, and they had all the girls, all 8 of them, sitting at a table. And one of the very few times, I saw my daughter with confidence and laughing and joking instead of a more quiet role. Now, if she listens to this podcast, she doesn't think she's quiet, right? And again, if she doesn't believe it, right, it doesn't matter what I think, right? But I want her to try more things. I want her to match her effort. I want her to know her power and put off that energy, that body language, to be noticed, to get respect. If you want to tone it down because you want to, right, get all the opportunity, but then you decide to not use it or use it, that's great. That's fine. But to be shut out, to disappear, to not get noticed, who you are, your hard work, see, that's where they're going to have a challenge in life, to see her have confidence to speak up. Would she have, if that was just a party of classmates and she didn't just come off a great game that, again, she knows that she had a great game, right? Would she have been as comfortable and make me so proud and really relieved, because I want to see her grow, if she didn't have a great game? I'm telling you, this sports thing is about confidence. Forget the word personal development. Confidence. to speak up, to blend in, to lead the conversation, tell a joke if that's not their personality, right? Confidence to raise your hand in school when you're only 99% certain you know the answer and nobody's raising their hand, right? I want my kids to raise their hand and I think I know it, I'm pretty certain I know it, and get it wrong and be okay with that growth mindset that we talked about, the mindset, the psychology, the Carol Dweck book that I talked about. I want them they'd rather be okay with that, thinking they got it right, raising their hand and getting it wrong, rather than nobody knows, the teacher asked the question, nobody has the answer, she has to give everybody an answer because everybody didn't know the answer or they weren't confident enough to speak up, and maybe they were influenced that nobody knew, so how can I be certain I know? And then the teacher gives the answer, and they go, I knew that. I don't want them to have, I knew that, but they didn't have the courage to raise their hand. They didn't have the confidence to raise their hand. They didn't have that growth mindset to realize, even if I get it wrong, I'm still growing out of it. All right? I want them to have the confidence and the self-esteem never to get bullied. And I'll tell you, my son, there's all kinds of bullying and subtlety as they fight for the pack and the alpha pack with kids. And even though he's a great athlete and he's confident, I hope he's not bullying kids, but there are some kids that you can tell he doesn't know how to handle it. All right? And if he allows it, it could be borderline bullying, and that's what I'm observing, right? I want him to have the confidence to stand up for himself and control the frame and not let, people push them into their reality when that's not, but he's uncertain with himself. I want him to have that kind of confidence, to never be bullied. Of course, I want the same, for my daughter. How about this? I want them to be so confident that if they're not being bullied, that they'll stick up for the kid that is being bullied. All right? They're so confident and so certain of what the right thing is doing that, that kid is getting bullied. They got someone in my son and daughter that they're confident of what's right. They're confident in themselves that they can protect that bully. Right? So why am I doing it? For all those things. Not to fulfill that I was only, whatever, right? Whatever the reasons other people might say. Right? So as long as you're pure in your intention why you're doing, that's all that matters. If you're willing to go through the squiggly line, have the growth mindset, that's all that matters. If you got to make adjustments, maybe you're pushing them too hard and you realize that later, it's what your heart is. Because we don't know how this is all going to end up. Right? I just posted on the Coach Your Kids Right podcast. I pulled it, and it was his dad. It got a lot of views the way he was talking with certain. He goes, my kid doesn't want to practice. I force him. My kid doesn't want to eat his vegetables. I force him. My kids don't want to do their homework. I force them. Right? And he makes no apologies that he knows what's best for them in the long run. And they're not going to know. He said they're going to play video games or do this if I don't force them. I have no problem forcing them. All right? Now, again, you're going to have, and you probably already have, force them, I'm making too much of this. I sometimes think about that not when I see my kids play, but when they're not playing and I just look at other kids that I'm not attached to, they're not my kids, and I see what a silly little game they're playing at 6 years old or whatever. Makes me think, why am I taking this so seriously? Am I pushing my kids too far? So you're going to have the battle within yourself all the time. So I think that's quite normal. And then with everything you have to balance it off with, it's more than sports, and as long as you make it more than sports, it's their own confidence building. To make them functional adults and to make it in this tough world. And that's what you're using sports. But you got other things. You got to pay the bills, run the business. You got employees. You got clients. You got a marriage. All those things. Maybe you may feel as though you're doing the right thing, but you've got it out of proportion And maybe you should lighten up on them, save some of that energy. We only have so much willpower, focus, energy, time. Save it, for all those other areas of life, and don't push your kids too hard. All right, because I'm not sure if they not liking or not wanting to do it. My theory is that they may not like it, not because of you and push them too hard, because everybody doesn't want construction, because that it's not clear that there's a route to overcome this downtime. Maybe they just see themselves in the middle pack, or they're just not good. Maybe they didn't do their reps, maybe whatever it is. And that's what they don't like about it. They're standing in the pecking order. In the pack of dogs, they don't want to be the beta dog or whatever, right? And it's not hitting the ball or not hitting the ball or shooting the basket or whatever. It's not they're being pushed hard to do this silly sports thing. It's not matching up of the way they see themselves. Maybe they need to have a talk and a reframe to try harder, to know the squiggly line, to be patient, to be resourceful, right? Maybe that's what they need, and it's not because they're being pushed too hard. Maybe they need to be influenced, persuaded, hypnotized into more empowering belief to get the most out of themselves in this thing that you've helped them and guided them to. All right, so you're going to have to question yourself if you're pushing your kids too hard. But what about? See, I'm not sure how much you would get from other parents. Like, they might say something subtly. Oh, well, my kid's well-rounded. He plays the violin, and we go on trips, and he's really good in school. And, maybe the reason why they're saying that is their little Johnny is just okay in sports, and they don't want to put that priority. They don't feel it's important, and they see you doing it. And maybe it's a subtle dig that you catch on to, that maybe they think you're pushing your kid too hard, right? Whatever. I mean, that's easy to shrug off. Hopefully this conversation is bringing to the surface is, helping you think about it a little deeper, right? But what about if your wife or it's your husband, and you've got this dream and vision, you're pure, and it's only to help them be better in life. It's not because you never made it or this or that or whatever, other people might think or say, all right? But what if you don't get the support? What if your partner, your husband, your wife, I guess partner, thinks you're pushing them too hard? What do you do then? You're going to have to be on the same page. Or here's the thing. That's probably the toughest thing. If your wife, verbally or non-verbally, directly or indirectly, thinks you're pushing your kids too hard. My wife isn't vocal about that. I mean,